Hi, everyone. A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from, and welcome to this session. As you can see on the screen, the session is going to be about one of our new services, INFACore, which we introduced as part of Informatica World 2022 and productionized as part of April Major this year. So the session is more of going to be an overview of this particular service and also a demo on the usage. Okay, so before I begin, let me talk about a product safe harbor statement that we have here, wherein what we're trying to say is the information that we are sharing here is solely intended for informational purposes only, and there could be things that are future looking and futuristic, and it should not be relied upon for making any kind of a purchasing decision. So with that, let me go ahead. The agenda for today's session, or basically the intention for today's session, is to try and understand what is InfaCore. But before we get to what is InfaCore, let's see why InfaCore. Right? We'll try to understand what is a problem statement that this particular service is trying to solve, and what was the idea behind this service, things like that. And then we will get to know what is InfaCore, and then we'll see a high level architecture as to what's going on behind the scenes of this service, followed by some real world analogies to understand the use cases and also some key benefits. And then we will dive into the components that are involved in this service, followed by an installation overview. And then towards the end, I will walk you through a short demo on how you use this particular service and then some next steps for you to take your first steps with InfoCo. Okay, so with that, let me continue. So if you see this slide, right, this just goes without saying. We know that data is becoming more and more important in today's world. And the slide kind of gives you the statistics on some of the key market drivers as of today. And I'm sure this is not something new for anyone who's working in the data world, right? So as you can see, there's data diversity, accelerated cloud modernization, wherein you have 94% of data center traffic that is going to be coming from the cloud, and every other company wants to harness the power of artificial intelligence. Now, leveraging the power of artificial intelligence is one of the greatest opportunities for modern businesses as of today. Right? As you can see, 50% of organizations are planning to incorporate the use of artificial intelligence and automation technologies in 2023. So you can see growth in the number of use cases for artificial intelligence and the growth in the number of the number of problem statements for you to try to harness the power of data, right? And you can see the number of new users, and there's going to be an explosion in data volume. As you can see this statistics, there's around 128 zettabytes of data that we expect by 2025. Now, as you can imagine, organizations are just trying to leverage this high volume and veracity of data, which is generated from a variety of siloed data sources, right? So but what's most important is having an ability to have a handle on this data. Now, having an ability to have a handle on this data will try to give you a competitive advantage, and it will try to help organizations to improve the customer experience also, right? So it all comes down to getting the true value of data. Now, what we understand is largely the low code developer persona in your organization play a key role in harnessing the value of data by building data driven applications. Now, who are low code developer persona? Right. So that kind of brings me to the next slide, where we have a kind of broad categorization on the developer persona as of today. Now, again, something important to note is this is not a strict demarcation that we have out there, but this is just our point of view on the our point of view to try to categorize the data management development methodologies that we have as of today. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the extremes first, right? So first, let's see the leftmost extreme, wherein you have the no-code developer persona. So this no-code developer is a person who is very much interested in a good, rich, and intuitive graphical user interface. So they basically do not dive into the intricacies of the layer that lies beneath your presentation layer, but they are largely harnessing your presentation layer only. So they are interested in a good number of pre-built options and features in a high degree of encapsulation and abstraction, basically. So they can get things done from the presentation layer itself. So that's a no-code developer. Now let's look at the rightmost extreme where you had the hand code developer persona. Now, the hand code developer person, as the name tells you, they are involved in full-fledged programming, right? They like to code, they like to build their own packages and frameworks, or in short, they basically use nuts and bolts of the programming language to build their own frameworks, their own packages, and all of that. So now, something that kind of a population that lies between the no code and the hand code developer persona is the low code developer persona, who is of interest as of today, and whom this particular service is kind of intended to cater to. So, focus is here on the low code developer persona for this particular session. So, who is this, right? Who is a low code developer persona? This is not to be confused with a hand code developer. So, there is a difference between a low code and a hand code developer. And what is it? A hand code developer kind of builds his or her own packages and frameworks, and they are basically not very interested in kind of encapsulation, abstraction, and things like that. But a low code developer is kind of interested or is highly interested in existing packages and frameworks. If anything, any existing packages and frameworks is given to them in the comfort of their IDE or in the comfort of their integrated development environment, they would be more than happy to kind of use it. It's not that they don't code. It's not that your low code developer does not code. Your low code developer definitely does code, but is also interested in a good degree of encapsulation, is interested in pre-built options. And if anything existing is given to them, existing packages, existing frameworks is given to them, they are more than happy to pick it up and then continue building on their data management use case. So ideally, the thing is that's going to give them an ability to rapidly prototype, right? So they just want to rapidly prototype and get things going. So that is a low code developer persona. Now, something common between a low code and a hand code developer is that they do not require a presentation layer. At least it's not mandatory for them. They are still trying to get to the intricacies of the layer that lies beneath your presentation layer. And you can see that in today's world, right, there is a growth in the number of low code developer persona. So you have a lot of data scientists, data engineers, machine learning engineers, data stewards, and all of that. So what we see is that there is a growth in the number of the low code developer persona. There's a growth in the number of the low code developers in today's market, right? And every organization is going to have a mix of no code, low code, as well as hand code in some of the organizations. But in most of them, you definitely have a mix of no code as well as low code developer persona. So what's becoming important here is that we will have to try to empower the low code developer persona as much as possible so that they can better harness the value of data and better bring out the true value of data. Right now let's zoom out a bit and try to understand, irrespective of the developer persona, right, irrespective of whether they are no code, low code, or hand code, there are a couple of challenges that all of these developers are facing. Now let's try to understand what are the challenges that this developer personas are facing in today's world. So if you see this, right, this particular slide talks to you about the key challenges that the developers of today are facing. As we also spoke about before, irrespective of the developer persona, these are the kind of challenges that they are facing in today's world. So something important to note is some of the key challenges are kind of reusability. Now, one thing is now because of the reason that the functionality or the technology of each application is different, right? So reusing business logic with more than one application is becoming a more common data management challenge these days. Now, one thing that's very important is when you are trying to build a complex business logic, you also need to think how reusable can it be. Now, although developers try to implement modularized programming models and all of that, the reusability becomes kind of very limited to that particular application, right? So then you have something called rapid prototyping. Now, if you see, as we spoke about in one of our previous slides, there is veracity of siloed data sources. Now, when you have siloed data sources, what happens is that you have different programming methodologies, and that kind of makes it difficult to rapidly prototype. Now, what happens? The result is that you're spending an inordinate amount of time kind of building applications. Now, unfortunately, these developers, they spend most of their time on repetitive and trivial tasks and not on innovative projects and a kind of creative projects for data management. Now, some of these developers do try context switching, but with context switching, what you're doing is you are kind of, although you're trying to do multitasking with context switching, you spend a lot of time switching between these applications, switching between these programming models and all of that. And unfortunately, this kind of frequent context switching reduces the productivity and thereby impacts the creativity as well. So yeah, so in short, the point is you're not able to rapidly prototype with all of these things. And you also have something called, the efficiency is also reduced through that. And another point to note is, given the complexities of the data ecosystems that we have as of today, it's also very important for you to ensure that all the data applications have proper governance controls in place, right? That's very important because even a minor glitch can lead to severe repercussions in the future. So developers also need to spend a lot of time kind of trying to make sure these non-functional requirements are also implemented properly. So in short, what we are seeing is that there is no pervasive platform to support the needs of all the data personas in a data driven enterprise. As we saw about the kind of categorization that we made, we do not have a kind of a platform that can specifically cater to the needs of all of them in one particular organization. Okay, so now let's see the current need of the hour, right? Here, if you see, so looking at the challenges, what is it that we will have to provide? What is it that we will have to try to provide? So when we came across this question, we try to understand that we will have to abstract complexities, right? So we will have to try to build out of the box options to kind of provide the flexibility. And we will also have to see if we can seamlessly integrate with the existing programs of a developer so that we can try to minimize their context switching. And also, we will have to give some kind of an ease of use to them so that there is no learning curve. And when there is no learning curve, there is maximum reusability and there is good collaboration, and all of that comes along with it. And future proof, that just goes without saying, is very important that we will have to try to see if we can provide built-in support for non-functional aspects, right? Something like your security, performance, or extensibility or version control, or be it migration options and all of that. So this is the need of the is the need of the hour in the current data world. So with all of this in context, let me kind of introduce you to INFACore. So now what is INFACore? It is a simple, open, extensible, embeddable, intelligent HDM component or headless data management component of IDMC. So I did emphasize on the words open, extensible, and embeddable, which we will talk about in the upcoming slides. Now, by HDM or the headless data management component, what we mean is that what we have tried to do is we have tried to decouple the presentation layer from IDMC so that we could take all the innovations, simplifications, abstractions, all of which that we have done all through the decades. We are trying to take all of this and bring it to the developers in the comfort of their own IDE. So put it in another way, right? It is basically like we are trying to simplify all of this and then give it to the developers in the comfort of their own integrated development environment so that they can start utilizing the power of IDMC without any context switching. So you can still, as a developer, you can still continue doing your programs within your own IDE, within your own programming language, and still call IDMC's capabilities by means of built-in functions. So that's why we say we have tried to turn voluminous code into simple built-in functions so that by means of these functions, you're still utilizing the capability of IDMC without the need for you to context switch or without the need for you to interact with our presentation layer, wherein in an ideal scenario you would try to log into IDMC host using a username, password, and things like that. So here the point is you need not interact with our presentation layer but still get the capabilities of IDMC within the comfort of your own IDE. So it kind of simplifies the creation of data pipelines, right? As we discussed in the previous slides as well, the need of the hour is to harness the quality of data and to get the true value out of data, right? So when your developers are focusing on kind of getting all of these into built-in functions, there is not much of learning curve. They need not context switch, and they can quickly start harnessing the high quality relevant data, right? Because in the cloud, you know that the only thing that you own is your data. So it is very important that you kind of deal with your data without the need for you to delay by means of context switching or when there is a learning curve and things like that. So that is INFACore in short. Now, how does INFACore kind of do this kind of a thing wherein it is trying to simplify your lines of code, it is trying to use built-in functions, it is taking all of IDMC's innovations in your own platform. Now, how does INFACore do that, right? For that, let us talk about the architecture. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes of the service. So basically, as you all know, Informatica is pioneer and it has simplified and automated a lot of our data management use cases through innovations that has been done over several decades, right? So we have been trying to make data management as simple as possible for our customers. But as of today, this is largely catered to the no-code developer persona. So as we also saw in the previous or the initial slides, that InfaCore comes in as an initiative that is intended to cater to the low-code developers. Now, how it does that, we're just about to see how it is doing that. So I'd like to take your attention to the left-hand side of the slide, which talks about the architecture behind this service. Now, as you can see, we have built three layers as part of this initiative, right? On top of our IDMC or on top of our Intelligent Data Management Cloud, which is our platform. So this API layer is basically like it can interact with IDMC and then it can make all of these IDMC's features available to these developer persona, which is also there in the current world. Even now, you can use these APIs and then access IDMC. But we understand that with APIs, you will have to remember the endpoints, the payloads, and other intricacies that comes along with it, right? So that's for the APIs. So what we have done is that we are building these SDKs or programming language wrappers just above this API layer, so which will try to kind of encapsulate all of these APIs and then try to provide simplified functions so that these developers need not remember the APIs, but just call functions with a set of parameters and then go about from there. So that is these programming language wrappers and SDKs. So it does not stop there. So just above that, what we have also done is that we are trying to provide productivity tools for popular developer IDEs, right? We understand that all of these low code developers, they kind of use their own IDEs, like say notebook interface, Eclipse, so on and so forth. So there are many developer IDEs wherein these developers code. So what we are trying to do as part of this service is that we are also building extensions or plugins that will further improvise the developer productivity. So so this is how we are trying to basically, with these three layers that we have built above our IDMC platform, we are trying to bring the power of IDMC to the comfort of your IDE without the need for you to context switch. You're still accessing IDMC, but you are still in the comfort of your own IDE. You have not you have not switched your interface, or you've not done any kind of context switching. So that's the architecture behind this service. Now, I shall take your attention towards right hand side of the slide, wherein we see that you know that I have been emphasizing on these words open, extensible, and embeddable. So let's see why we like to call these as the three pillars of InfaCore. Now let's talk about why it is open first, right? So first is you are able to access the fine-grained capabilities of IDMC within the third-party application. So if you see in the current world, if you want to query a data source, you may probably have to build a pipeline to stage data somewhere and then go on from there, right? But with InfaCore, that is not required. So you may be, as a developer, your entire use case of what you may be interested will be just to connect to a data source and then retrieve the data. And that's about it, right? And that's what you're doing with InfaCore as well. You will just have to connect to a data source and then you will have to retrieve the data and then continue with your program, with your machine learning model and whatever you have been doing. You need not context switch. You need not kind of do anything out of the way, but just call in few functions, get the power of IDMC using the power of IDMC, right? You can basically retrieve the data, wherein InfaCore is going to do all the IDMC work for you, get the data in your own IDE, and then kind of go on from there. So that's one reason we call it as open. Now, extensible as in, see, if you know that the design time is anyways a third party application, right? So wherein you will be using any kind of a programming language or IDE, wherein you are leveraging your InfaCore. But your runtime could be an existing runtime or an Informatica managed runtime, such as the secure agent. Now, what this means is that if the runtime of the existing environment is limited, say that your existing environment it cannot process hexabytes of data. So even then, with the power of INFACore, you can still utilize the compute of Informatica, wherein the secure agent comes into the picture. So in short, what's happening is the execution is happening outside of the third-party application by means of Informatica's secure agent. And this is how we have tried to extend the compute power of the third-party application. And this is the reason why we call this as an extensible kind of a solution, or wherein we are trying to extend the compute power or the capability of the third party application itself by means of this service. So, reason why we call it extensible. Now, it's also embeddable. Now, it's embeddable because we are trying to embed the design time as well as runtime within a third party application. And also, we are in discussion and partnership with few of our ecosystem partners like Snowflake, SageMaker, and all, where we are trying to have a deep integration with these third party applications and ecosystems. Okay, so that is the reason we call it embeddable. Now, I know that I have spent much time on this slide. So just to kind of summarize it, because this kind of gives you the context and prelude to the rest of the presentation as well. So just to summarize, we did see the architecture behind this service, the layers that have been built above IDMC to access the power of IDMC within your own IDE, no need to context switch. And then we tried to understand why we like to call it the three pillars like open, extensible, and embeddable, the three pillars of INFACore. We try to understand why it is called the three pillars. Now, as you can see, there are use cases also here, but I would like to talk to you about the use cases with some real world analogies. So let's get to understand some real world analogies and then see how INFACore is trying to cater to these use cases. So here are some analogies for you to better understand the use cases where you can best use INFACore. So let's look at Grammarly. I'm sure you all know Grammarly very well, so it requires no introduction, be it Grammarly or Google Maps. Let's look at Grammarly first. So it's basically a cloud-based typing assistant, right? It reviews your grammar, spelling, punctuation, clarity, and all of that. Now, how are Grammarly's writing tools designed? They are designed in such a way that you can work where you do, right? Be it your phone, your laptop, in your web browser, or in your editors, wherever. So once you add the Grammarly's extension to your browser or to your editors, you can directly start accessing Grammarly's writing suggestions from any of these applications. It could be your Gmail, it could be your LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, so on and so forth. So the idea behind this entire thing is that you need not do any kind of context switching and there is no learning curve. You still use whatever you're using in the comfort of your own platform. You are still able to access the power of Grammarly, right? You're still able to access the Grammarly's writing suggestions in the comfort of your own platform. Now, with this idea, when you look at INFACore, it is kind of similar to this, wherein once you have your INFACore plugin, once you have installed the plugin, it kind of starts radically simplifying and enhancing your developers' productivity because you are able to use IDMC's data management capabilities within your development workspaces without any context switching. You continue doing what you're doing. At the same time, start using IDMC's capabilities within the comfort of your environment. So this is how you can relate Grammarly with INFACore. Now, if we are looking at another use case, right, an analogy of another use case, you can think of Google Maps. So again, Google Maps, it requires no introduction. But again, just for me to put context into this, let me tell you, Google Maps is like a digital navigation tool, right? So what happens is, instead of building homegrown map solutions and all of that, many delivery and taxi applications, as you know, they use Google Maps to enhance their customer experience. So basically, they are trying and building their own applications. But when it comes to map solutions, they use Google. They are not creating or they are not building custom map solutions, but rather it's easier for them to use Google so that they can start focusing on their applications much better. They are still utilizing the power of Google within their overall application. Right, so that is another use case. Similar to that, similar to how Google Maps is being used, you can also start building your own applications. But at the same time, your data management solutions can be still managed by Informatica through INFACore. Right, so instead of you focusing on building custom data management solutions, you can directly use IDMC within the comfort of your platform. So that is very much analogous to how you're using Google Maps, right? So if you look at this overall, these two use cases, right? One is a use case wherein you are using it directly, and another is a use case wherein it's an OEM kind of a solution, wherein you are building a product. But when you're building a product or an application, you are using the power of IDMC, or using the power of the data management solutions provided by IDMC within your overall application, right? So by now, I'm sure you all know the key benefits already, right? So we are trying to empower the low-code developers. This particular service caters to the low-code developers, and you are radically simplifying thousands of lines of code into a single INFACore function. So you start rapidly prototyping. There's no need of context switching, which kind of automatically helps you to rapidly prototype. And you can also make use of Claire. So what's Claire? It's for those of you who are already familiar with IDMC, I'm sure you must be much aware. It's Informatica's artificial intelligence engine, so which uses the machine learning capabilities in the background. So you do have intelligent recommendations, intelligent structure discovery, and so on and so forth. So the benefit that you get here is that you can start harnessing the power of Claire within the comfort of your own IDE as well. You can also get access to the wide variety of connectors that IDMC offers you. So, in short, if you look at this, you are basically operationalizing seamlessly, right? You're operationalizing seamlessly at scale with fully integrated IDMC solutions. So the thing is, you're speeding up delivery, and at the same time, you are accelerating your time to market. So now that you have seen the key benefits, let us look at the components that are involved within this particular service. Right? So when we dive into this, we do have SDKs and we do have extensions. So basically, the thing is that SDKs are nothing but software development kits. So they will help you to manage your data from your environment. Right? You can programmatically access InfraCore services by means of software development kits. And you also have the other component, which is nothing but the extension. So what's extension is nothing but the user interface kind of a layer, right? So the extension will work. It is an additional layer just above your SDK. It kind of gives you the ability to perform simple actions from the user interface, such as logging into InfraCore, or connecting to a data source, applying functions, and so on and so forth. So you can perform all of this by means of the user interface extension. Now, this kind of interface simplifies working with InfraCore. It also reduces the amount of code that you may need to write. But again, you may choose to use SDK independently or without the extension. Okay, now let's see how we use those components for our installation. If you see, you do have certain prerequisites. You can register with InfraCore and create a trial account. And there are a few system requirements that you may have to verify. It is very clearly and elaborately mentioned in our documentation, which we have linked as part of this video as well. So I would suggest to take a look at that, make sure that your system requirements are met, and post that you can start setting up your development environment. But even before that, even before you set up your development environment, another additional thing to note is that your Jupyter Lab version must be 3.4.2 or later, and your Python version must be 3.8.0 to 3.11, and so on. Okay, so those are certain prerequisites for you to take care. So you can also have a look parallelly at the documentation. Make sure that your prerequisites are met before you go ahead. So next, what you do is, once you make sure that your prerequisites are good, you can get to start downloading certain wheel files that are present in the marketplace. So what you'll just have to do is you will have to download those packages. There are two wheel files that are given to you. Just download them into the environment wherever you want to install InfraCore, right? So you can just use a pip install command. Again, these installation commands are also given to you in our documentation page, where you will just have to do a pip install and then give the file name wherever you want to install your InfraCore. Now, you do have a wheel file for your Python and also for your Jupyter Lab. Now, if you're using Anaconda, you can activate your Conda environment wherever you want to install the packages. And once you have activated the Conda environment, you can post that, you can start doing the pip install of those packages. And once you are done, you can also activate the extension. And once you have done that, you are good to go. You can open Jupyter Lab. You must be able to see the INFACore extension out there, and then you can go ahead with using INFACore. So that is the installation in short. So as I have also reiterated before, please make sure that you have your documentation page open, and it's important to make sure that your prerequisites are met before you download, because the downloading steps and the installation steps are pretty simple, wherein you just have two wheel files and you can go ahead with the installation. But what's more important to note is that your prerequisites are met, and also when you're downloading, please make sure that your Jupyter Lab version and Python version is as per whatever is mentioned in documentation or here. Okay, so now let's look at a short demo of how you use INFACore. Okay, so as you can see here in my system, I have opened Anaconda prompt because I'm using an Anaconda environment. So as a best practice, you can try and activate your Anaconda environment. So let's do that. I already have created an environment. So let me try to act by the name Jupyter Lab ext. So the Anaconda environment that I've created is Jupyter Lab ext. I'm trying to activate this particular environment. So let me do that. Yeah, so this particular environment within Anaconda has got activated. Now, as you can see, I have installed all of these wheel packages as well from the Informatica marketplace that we spoke about in our previous slides. Okay, I've downloaded that. And what you will have to do is, I'm not doing it here because I'm not doing the pip install because I have already done that. But what you will have to do at this stage is do a pip install of the two packages that you have downloaded. So it's just a simple command, which is also present in our documentation, wherein you will just have to write pip install of this particular file, of both the files. Now, once you have done that, you will have to activate your extension. So let me do that. Since I have already done the pip install, let me activate the extension. So I have this particular extension, Jupyter Lab INFACore. So I'm trying to activate that. Let me do that. Okay, so now this has got activated. Now what we'll do is we will try to open Jupyter Lab from here. Considering that we have done the prerequisites now, we have basically activated the Anaconda environment and then done the pip install of the files as required. And also we have enabled the Jupyter Lab extension. Now, something important to note is that all of this is to be done only after checking if your system requirements are met. Okay, in your prerequisites, you also have the system requirements. Please make sure all of that is met, and then get to these steps. So these are the other requisite steps for you to get started. Okay, so now let us open Jupyter Lab, considering that we have all the prerequisites checked. So Jupyter Lab. Okay, now we can see that the Jupyter Lab is opening. Okay, so as you can see, I have few assets built as well for the demo purposes, but then let me get to the interface. So as you can see here, first let's talk about this particular interface, right? The Jupyter Lab interface. For those of you who may be new, you can see that you do have all of these already installed for you, these things, right? The Jupyter Lab INFACore and all of this, because we've already enabled the extensions. Now, if you look towards your right, you do have this particular interface wherein you will be asked to log in at first. I have already logged in from here, so it gives me a welcome message. But when you do it for the first time, you will be asked to log in from here. Okay, so once you log in, if you have installed your secure agent, then well and good, it reflects the status. But if not, it will ask you to download the secure agent. So you will just have to click on this, and what's going to happen is it is going to download and do the registration process with the org as well. So in a normal IDMC environment, you may have to do the registration separately, but here this is kind of automated, wherein once you click on this, it's going to download the agent and it is going to register the agent with your org. Okay, all of this it's going to do. and then it is going to say up and running. So another point to note is that if you are logged into IDMC as well, ideally you need not basically log into another IDMC environment once you have it here. But for the sake of this, for the sake of understanding this even better, I am relating it to IDMC so that it will be easier for you to get to understand what's going on behind the scenes, right? So what happens is, by the time your secure agent is getting registered and all of that, once that is done, you will have the services enabled as well. So your data integration service, all of this gets enabled by default within your secure agent machine. Okay. Secure agent machine, when I say those who know IDMC pretty well, it's something that they should, it's something that you would be familiar with as well, all of the services, right? So if you see, this is a secure agent that I have. So if I'm going to look at the services, right, if I'm going to enable disable services and connectors, it is going to already enable data integration and all of this for me. Okay, so that way you can already see that there are services running by default. So once you have clicked on that download button, you already have all of these services running. Okay, so post that, it is going to show you an up and running status. Now, once that is done, here you can see connect to data sources, which means that all of the data sources that is available for you, you can try and connect to them. So say, for example, you want to look at a Snowflake connection. Let me just type in Snowflake here. So what happens is that, as you can see, it comes up. You do have the Snowflake. So just click that on, and you have the ability to create a new Snowflake connection, to edit the Snowflake connection, and also to test a connection. So these are two Snowflake connections that I've created from here. So say, for example, I click on one. So I have all of these connection options or connection actions given to me, wherein this plus indicates that you can create a new connection. This indicates that you can add code to test a connection. So what does this mean is that when you click on this, right, you get a new code that's getting added. Okay, so let me just open this one meanwhile. Okay, so this is open. Now say, for example, I'm clicking on this. Okay, so it's going to write this particular code for me here. Okay, so that's what this means. So the thing is that you will be able to basically write the code over here, and then it's going to execute that particular connection. Now here what happens is, if you look towards my console, you can see all of these. Okay, so you can see that the test connection for this was successful. So what has happened is, in the background, it has logged into IDMC, it has tested the connection for you, and it has returned the result, right? So you need not even write the code here, but rather just click on this. It adds the code snippet for you. It does the action, whatever is to be done, and then it is returning the result. Okay. So similar to that, you can do all of these operations with any of the connections that is given here. So this is for editing the connection. These are all for Snowflakes. Similarly, you can do it for the rest as well. Okay, so now if you scroll down, you can see something called apply functions. So let us get to that. So there are a few CDI functions that are here for you. You have read, write, to pandas, from pandas, provision data, parse, unstructured, and all of that. So what this basically tells you is that once you click on this, it's going to ask you to give a data source object. So once you give your data source object here, it is going to write the code for you. So if you look at my console, all of these code snippets have been generated from here. It's not handwritten, but rather it's been generated from here. So what you can just do is give your data source object, whatever you are using, and then give submit. It is going to the code is going to appear for you here. So it's a lazy compute kind of a method wherein you will have to execute it by yourself. It's not going to execute by itself. Okay. So similar way, parse unstructured data. So parse unstructured data is the ability where, if you remember, we did speak in one of our slides, you can utilize Informatica's Claire as well, right? So here you are using parse unstructured data, wherein the intelligence structure model is being used in the background. So there is the ISD which is running in the background. If you have come across that component in IDMC which uses Claire, so that is being run in the background, where it is going to parse the unstructured data and return the data set for you. Okay, and then similarly, you have read, write, to pandas, from pandas, and provision data. So wherein the methodology that you use is still the same, wherein click that on, give the data source object, the code snippet appears. If you want to edit, still go on and edit. If not, just get to the execution. So that is what all of these operate. And you also have certain pre-built rules. So pre-built rules are nothing but data quality rules, which are using applets in the background, wherein you have things like validate email address, find invalid names, remove control characters, and all of this. Okay, these are all data quality functions. So we also have a very elaborate mention of this in our documentation portal as well. You could feel free to have a look. But these are all the data quality functions that are given to you. These also operate the same way, where you kind of click it on, give the corresponding variable data source object, whatever, and then continue with your coding. Okay. So this is about this particular plugin. Now let's get to the code snippet. So here, what I have done is I've tried to import INFACore's library. So this is a very lightweight one, very similar to how you import any other library in Python. Let me do that. I've just given few simple examples for you to try to understand how INFACore works. Okay, so yeah, now I have imported INFACore as IC. So IC being my alias name, I can try to list all the connections. So if you have noted, I've done the same thing here as well, wherein I've tried to list the connections and I've got Snowflake. Same action I'm going to do here, wherein I have tried to list the connections and I can see Snowflake INFACore and Snowflake INFACore IS, which has been created. Now, just taking a step back, I did mention that here you can click it on and then get the code and then start executing. Now, say for example, you are more comfortable with writing code than kind of using this, then you are free to basically start writing code here. You're free to write the code here and then edit. You even may or may not use this particular plugin. That's still okay, but you can still write code here. Okay, so yes, now you can see this is the test connection, which we already saw, where I've just clicked on this, generated the code for test connection, and it has tested the connection for me. Now, if you see, there is a read data object. So wherein I'm trying to read a table from Snowflake. So if you see, I have just clicked on read object. I've just clicked on this read function. So when I clicked on read function, I am trying to give a particular data source object name here. So once I've given that, it has generated this particular code for me, wherein I have read data object. I'm getting the source called Snowflake. I'm getting the Snowflake connection, and then I'm getting the data object. Basically, I have created something called Apple as a table, and I'm trying to get that. I'm going to collect it and then put it in a data frame. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let me execute this, wherein I'm trying to read the table from Snowflake. And for you to better understand this, right, let me kind of open up the IDMC console as well. The IDMC UI as well. So if you see here, something to note is that when you are trying to execute this, right, so when you have executed the read command, you will also see in parallel a mapping task that is being created. Okay, so if you see this, I have opened my data integration monitor or data integration my jobs page, wherein I can see that a new mapping task has been created for that particular function, right? So this is INFACore in action for you, wherein you're clicking that on, and INFACore is basically trying to create a mapping task in the background and then execute that mapping task here. Now, essentially, it's not required for you to log into IDMC and check this, but I am showing this to you only for you to have a reference and for you to just try and understand what's happening in the background. Only for that reason I have opened IDMC, but ideally you can just look at this and get the result. It's not exactly required for you to get to IDMC and then look at what's happening in the background. Okay. So yeah, this is being executed. While that is being executed, let me talk to you about the code snippets that are there forward. So here, if you see, I have tried to convert this particular data frame into a pandas data frame, because you may want to use pandas functions further in your machine learning models or in your workflows, whatever, so on and so forth. You could have codes that's written. You may want to use pandas functions. So when you want to do that, you can convert your INFACore's data frame into pandas data frame. So for that as well, we have given this ability, this particular function. You can just click on that, and then it is going to give this code for you, wherein you have converted this particular table to a pandas data frame. So once you have it converted, you can start using all the pandas functions. So as you can see here, I have converted this to a pandas data frame. Once I have converted, I have just issued a PDF.head, which is a simple pandas function. If you're familiar with pandas, it becomes much more simpler for you. You can use any other pandas function. So I've given a head function wherein I can see that I can see the the 4 rows that are present in that particular table. Now, just to pause here, you can see that this particular code has got executed. Now, if you look at the mapping task here, right, this also would have got succeeded. So you can see this particular mapping task which has got created, and there are 4 success rows, which means it has read 4 rows. You also have the ability to download your session log and see that. Again, let me reiterate this point that it's not required for you to log into IDMC and then check whether there is all of this, but then I am doing this for you to understand what's going on in the background. But say you're familiar with IDMC and you're familiar with INFACore, then you are free to toggle between the two. You are free to decode it, or I'm sorry, you are free to debug it from your IDMC's platform as well using a session log. So that's up to you. But if you're a pure no-code developer, then, or if you're a pure low-code developer, to be more precise, you can still feel free to just use this. Okay. Again, another point to reiterate is that this does not come in as a replacement to IDMC, but this is just an effort to start extending or to start taking IDMC's capabilities to the low-code developer persona. So earlier we were catering only to the no-code, but with this we are trying to bring in an effort to cater to the low-code persona. I would like to reiterate this point again because I want you to be clear that this does not come in as a replacement to IDMC, but this is just a way that where we have given an effort to kind of start catering to the low-code developer persona. Okay, so yeah, getting back to the code snippets here. So the read has been done, and you can see that if you're issuing a PDF.head, you will be able to see the you will be able to see the rows or whatever data you have stored in that particular table. Okay, so next what I've tried to do is I have just done a from pandas, so wherein I have converted this from pandas to the Informatica's data frame itself, INFACore data frame. So once that is done, I have tried to write to a Snowflake table that also works a similar fashion. Just click on write, and then you can give the connection. So here you can see it's ic.get data source, Snowflake INFACore get data object, and then you can create the target. Okay, so once you have done that, you can execute it, and you will be able to see all of these details in the console for you, wherein you can see that there is a mapping task that has got created and what are the success rows, failed rows, and all of that. So it is going to return that particular log for you when you issue a write. Okay, so once you have done that, you have basically tried to read from a Snowflake table and then write to a Snowflake table, right? Now, let me talk to you about the pre-built rules. Now, pre-built rules are also as simple and as straightforward. You can feel free to build upon this. I have given you simple examples, but you can build upon this very easily because all of these work in a similar fashion or in a similar way. Okay, so here basically, if you see, I do have a flat file connection named as FF What I have tried to do is I have tried to get this particular data object, which is email validation.txt, wherein within this flat file connection, I do have a file called email validation.txt, and within this file, I have a column called email. So I am trying to basically get the valid email addresses and all of that. So for that, I have used this particular validate email address function or the pre-built rule, wherein I'm trying to read the data object, and then I have issued this data quality function, wherein I'm trying to find the invalid email. Okay. So now you can see it has returned this particular result for me, wherein I have the validation status as valid or invalid. Okay, so this is an example of your pre-built rules. Now let us see a simple example of parsing unstructured data, right? Parsing semi-structured data, wherein I did speak to you about this particular function, right? So let us see how this function works. It's again similar. I have moved on to another console here. So these activities that have been done are very similar, wherein I have a flat file and then I have done a read.collect into a data frame, converted it into pandas, issued a head command and tried to read the data from a flat file, similar to how we did from Snowflake. Okay, so if you want to parse unstructured data, what you can do is just click on this. Okay, and as you can see, I have already done that here. It's ic.parser functions, and here you can see that the parse unstructured data, I have given this particular file. So I have a JSON file here, right? I do have a JSON file that I have within my C drive or within my system. So what I have done is I've just clicked on, I have clicked on the parse unstructured data, given the file name, and once I have done that, I've converted it into a pandas data frame, and then I have issued a head. So what has happened is it has returned data in a relational structure for me. So in the background, there is a structure parser that is being executed, or the ISD, intelligent structure model, that is getting executed in the background. Okay, so this is an example for you. Okay, so in summary, what we have seen is we have tried to understand how we kind of open up a Jupyter Lab from a Conda environment. As best practices, we activated the Conda environment, and once we have activated that, we have issued a pip install of the packages, whatever you have downloaded from Informatica Marketplace. And once you have done that, you have activated the Jupyter Lab extension. And once you have activated the extension, what you have done is you have opened Jupyter Lab, and that's where we are here. So when you see the Jupyter Lab, we have tried and understood what is this extension all about, how you can use it, what is being shown here, how you can use the different connections, how you can create a connection, test a connection, edit a connection, and all of that. And we also saw the functions, what are the functions that are available, how you can use those functions, and also certain pre-built rules from CDQ or the cloud data quality, which are basically using the maplets in the background. We also saw how we can read from a Snowflake table, write from a Snowflake table after creating a Snowflake connection, validate an email address, and also we tried to parse the unstructured data. So in summary, I suppose this kind of gives you an idea as to how you can install and start about using INFACore for your use cases with a local secure agent. So now let's see how you can use INFACore natively in Databricks. Okay, so what you can see on my screen is a Databricks notebook. We don't have much of a difference in terms of the functions that you're using and all of that. It's still going to be the same. The only difference being that you are now using INFACore within the Databricks ecosystem or within the Databricks notebook. So let me just walk through, let me just give you a demo on how you will use it here. Okay, so if you look at this particular command, which is pip install, which we also spoke about in our local as well, right? So we did do a pip install of the wheel packages that I was talking to you about. So here as well, you will have to do the same thing where you will download the wheel file from Informatica's marketplace. And once you do that, you will have to issue a pip install of that particular Python SDK. Okay, so if you can see, I have downloaded this wheel file within DBFS file store, and I have done a pip install. So I have already executed this particular command for the purpose of this demo. And you can see that this command has got executed. So once that is done, you can basically use INFACore after a couple of steps. There's not much that you will have to do. Just do a pip install, and post that I've issued a pip install pandas. Okay, and which is again not exactly mandatory. If you are if you're going to use pandas data frames and all of that, then you can install it. And if you look at this one, right, this is something that we did in our local as well. We imported Informatica's libraries, so you can do that here as well. Now, once you do it, you are good to go. You can start utilizing all of the functions of INFACore and all of that. Okay. So if you see, if you want to understand if the installation has gone well and all of that, you can do an ic.help. So what ic.help gives you is some good information on the available classes, methods, some documentation links and all of that. So if you see, it gives you all of this kind of an information. So it is a good read for someone who's new to INFACore. You can have a look at all of this. One second. Yeah. So you can have a look at all of the available methods and other documentation links and all of that. Okay. So that is ic.help command for you to just understand if everything has gone well. So post that, what I've tried to do is given the user configuration to log in. Okay, so this is also similar to local, but the difference that you will see here is that you will have to give the ecosystem information. Reason being that here you will have the data will be staged. I mean, you will not be required to do anything other than give a valid Databricks Delta connection name. What happens behind the scenes is that data gets staged in Databricks Delta. So that is the reason we give the ecosystem as an additional content here. Okay, so something else to note is which let me take a step back to tell you this. You will have to make sure that your cluster is up and running. So here I already have the cluster up and running because here we are also utilizing Spark's capabilities. Okay, so please make sure that your cluster is up and running for this. now let's get back to the user configuration. So as you can see, there is this particular code snippet that kind of gives you the login and also the ecosystem. Now, even if you have not created the Databricks Delta connection, you can choose to do that from here. And you can also kind of log in and then post that, create the Databricks connection, and then update the code snippet as well. So if you see, I have executed this, and you can see that my data integration server has started. The compute engine setup has got completed successfully. The assets have been completed, and the staging setup has also got completed successfully. So this is what it has returned to me once I have executed the above code snippet. So once that is done, you are good to go. You can start utilizing INFACore with the alias name IC, since we do have the import informatica.infacore as IC command, right, which we executed. So with that alias, you can continue using INFACore within your Databricks ecosystem. Okay, so now if you see, it's nothing different from your local. So here as well, if you see, what I have tried to do is I've tried to get the Snowflake data source, and I've tried to list all the connections of Snowflake, which is a very similar thing that we did in local as well. So it has listed the Snowflake connections that I have. Now, say for example, you want to list all data sources. Let us try to do that here. Right? Let me add a cell, and then let me kind of, it also gives you options, in fact. So see, now you can see that I want to list data sources. You can see that particular option coming up for you. You can traverse through that, and then you can also write the code. So if you see, when I try to give list data sources, it is going to list all the data sources for me. So which is a similar thing that was done in local as well. Okay, so another example is testing your Snowflake connection. This is for the demo purposes. I have used Snowflake, but you can feel free to test any data source by means of this particular function where you have ic.getDataSource, get connection, and then test the connection. Very similar thing with the local also. Now, another example that I have here is I've tried to list all the data objects from a flat file connection. So I have this first underscore flat file connection created with an IDMC. So I'm trying to list all the data objects within this particular flat file connection. That's an example. Now, similarly, you can get the configuration options and all of that. And this, if you see, again, I've tried to read data from a particular object in Snowflake. So here I'm just calling a read.collect on top of the data object that has been created, right? So you can see this. This is something that we did in local as well. So here as well, I've tried to do that. Now, what happens when you execute this is that behind the scenes, as we already discussed, there is a mapping that is going to be created. And here in this case, you will have Snowflake as the source. The data is going to be staged in Databricks Delta, and from the staging area, right, the data is going to be extracted, and it is going to be loaded back to Databricks Delta notebook in the native data frame itself. So in this case, it is the PySpark data frame. Okay, so it is going to be returned to you in that particular PySpark data frame. But this is not something that you will have to worry about, because once you execute this, all of this is going to happen in the background. I just wanted to give you a preview, or wanted to give you an idea about the behind the scenes activity. So that's the reason I have mentioned to you all of that. But that's not something that you will have to worry about once you have the valid Snowflake connection or valid data source connection, any operation that you may be doing, and the staging connection, you are good to go. You can issue a read.collect, and then you will get your result here. So if you see, I have executed this, and it has returned the data, and it has collected the data within this particular object in PySpark data frame. Okay, so once I have done that, you can still use all the PySpark functions and all of that. So if you see, I have tried to do a table.count. I have 16 records within that table, so it has given me the result. So something else to note here is that if you have noticed this, right, even the data frames have been changing from setup to setup. Now, if you see that, if you see within the local, in the local mode, we were returning the PyArrow data frame. So even developers kind of like this kind of thing, right, wherein we are returning the data in the native data frame itself. So if you see in the local, we did have it returned as a PyArrow data frame, and we were providing a lot of functionality on top of it, like you can translate it to pandas and so on and so forth, right? Pandas is kind of a common data frame in the data science world. So we do have the two pandas from pandas, all of that functionality that is given to you, and you can do the conversion, and then you can go ahead, right? So similarly, in this case, in the Databricks case, we are returning data in the Spark data frame. And you can do all the PySpark functions. You can do things like your data cleansing, or pre-processing, wrangling, and all of that using PySpark functions itself. And we also support translation here also. So from PySpark, say if you want to convert to pandas, which is a popular data frame, if you want to convert to that, you can still do that. You can still convert to pandas data frame, and you can continue using pandas function. So that also can be done. So if you scroll down, I've tried to do exactly that. So here it's a similar function that we did with local as well, wherein I'm trying to read this particular PySpark data frame, and I'm trying to convert that into pandas, and have issued a simple pandas function for head. Okay, basically I just want to see the data over there. So I have issued, I have kind of written this particular code snippet. Now what that has done is it has executed, and it has given me the list of records that is there within that table. So basically the underlying statement here, what we would try to make is that you can convert your PySpark into pandas data frame, and you can continue using your pandas functions. That ability is given to you. So you can also get the advanced config options and all of that. So once you have done this particular setup, you are good to go. You can try out different things. You can try out different pandas functions and all of that. If you are in the mid of your AI/ML workflow, you can call your IDMC's capabilities within your workflow, and then continue working in your own context without you needing to switch between IDMC or anything like that. So natively within data frame, you are using the capabilities of IDMC and still continuing with what you're doing, right? So that is the power of INFACore. So that kind of brings me to the demo in Databricks. So in summary, what we saw in Databricks is that we did the same pip install of that particular Python SDK. So once we did that, we imported Informatica as INFACore as IC as the alias name. And once that was done, the library has got imported, the lightweight INFACore library. So once that is done, it's like very similar to any other Python library. Once that was done, we were logging in, created the staging connection as Databricks. Once that was done, we tried doing different types of functions, and we tried to understand how data gets staged and then gets to you, and that all of this is abstracted to you. And what you need to do is just continue doing what you're doing and still utilize the power of IDMC within the comfort of your own platform. In this case, it is Databricks. And something important to also note is that you will have to have your cluster up and running. And for the purpose of this demo, I do have this up and running. So this is what we saw as part of this demo. Now that kind of takes me back to the presentation. Let us get to that. So here, as you see in this slide, these are few steps to help you get started. You do have this, as we did speak about the Informatica Marketplace, you can sign up for a trial, you can download all the extensions and SDKs that we spoke about. And you also have a couple of good YouTube video links and a good blog with the overall documentation. So these are all a few things that you can refer as and when you're trying out INFACore. So that kind of brings me to the end of this presentation. I hope you all got an idea about what this particular service called INFACore is all about, and how you can get started, and you can get started with few steps related to INFACore. I hope the session was useful, and I would like to thank all of you for following me through the session and for joining in. Hope you all have a really good day, and thank you again.